It happened at the wedding of my husband's sister. What an awful tie. My husband Ethan criticized the tie I picked, so I responded. What? I don't remember buying that. Doesn't your mistress always pick your ties? At that, my father-in-law, who happened to overhear our conversation at the same table, glared at me. What did you say? My name is Emma, a 36-year-old housewife. My husband Ethan is also 36 and works as a sales director. We don't have any children yet. Ethan seems to really mind that. Look at your colleagues' families, they have 3 or 4 kids. And us? None. It's embarrassing. What a disaster of a wife I ended up with. We've been married for 5 years, and you're not infertile, are you? Don't start saying later that you want to try fertility treatments. That's just throwing money down the drain. It costs nothing to make kids naturally. I'm not paying extra, do it with your own savings if you want. Really, it's depressing from the morning, it's all your fault, you know? Well, a wife without a sense of responsibility wouldn't think about it, but you really are an awful woman. Ethan, tightening his tie himself, glares at me nearby. And what about this? Your husband is tying his tie, and you don't even help? Normally, a wife should be devoted to her husband. I'm sorry. I always tell you to have the newspapers ready for breakfast, but do you even care? You don't even bother to get the papers and keep oversleeping. And at night, you sleep first, even though I give you money for expenses, you can't even manage to buy cigarettes, you're so bad with money. And don't you dare say the living expenses aren't enough. I earn enough, it's your incompetence that's the problem. Ethan, having gotten ready, grabs his bag and leaves the room. What about breakfast? I can't eat your cooking, it's terrible. I have to eat out, what kind of harassment is this? Your cooking is bad. You should learn my family's way of cooking. Why don't you go train at your mother's place? Well, she's passed away, so it would be in the afterlife. Well, you can hardly be called a bride anymore. With a loud slam, Ethan storms out of the house. Though Ethan puts on airs of a patriarch, he's really just a spoiled brat. I know. I've noticed how his possessions keep increasing. From ties to dress shirts and even pens. For Ethan to buy them himself, they're too tasteful. It makes me naturally suspect he's cheating. But if I say anything to Ethan, it comes back at me 100-fold, so I can't casually mention suspicions of infidelity. But, you know, it does seem like he's definitely cheating. While hanging laundry, I mutter to myself. My woman's intuition whispers, Ethan is cheating. And I do prepare the newspapers. I try to meet Ethan's demands. But Ethan says, today I feel like a different newspaper, and doesn't even touch them. Just then, a call comes from a friend. Good morning. Emma, are you okay today? Did your husband say anything? Yeah, well, you know. The usual, but listen. If I were to really meet Ethan's demands for newspapers, I'd have to get 4 different kinds, and yet the money Ethan gives for expenses always goes to things like loan payments, and I'm scrambling at cheap supermarkets for groceries. I can't save up in such conditions, and Ethan won't let me work. He thinks he's not providing for me. He says to cut back on expenses. But it's practically as if Ethan doesn't provide for me, though I can't quite say that. Ethan doesn't get physical, but he does hurl cutting words. I complain to my best friend Grace. We've been close friends for over 10 years, she's a source of comfort. I've been feeling drained lately. Ethan is more of a spoiled brat than a patriarch, and I was foolish to marry someone like him. Emma, it's not your fault. Call me anytime if something happens. Thanks. I rely on you, talk to you later. I hung up the phone. After cleaning the house, I returned from shopping. I notice a flyer in the mailbox. A detective agency flyer? That would be perfect for investigating Ethan's infidelity, but it's so close by, I worry about the neighbors' eyes. I'd like them to investigate Ethan's infidelity, and I wish I could end this marriage too. Infidelity investigation? That reminds me. I grabbed my phone and called Grace. Grace? Sorry, are you okay now? perpetually single and off work today, so it's all good. What's up? Can I ask you for a favor? It might be interesting. If it's coming from you, Emma, it sounds like it could be fun. I asked Grace for a favor. Later, I was invited to the wedding of my husband's sister, my sister-in-law. I spent the morning busy making breakfast and preparing for the wedding. At Ethan's behest, I read the newspaper and rushed around. Then I took a taxi to the venue and met the relatives. There, Ethan spread his sales charm around the relatives. Auntie. How have you been? Uncle, good to see you too. If he were always this nice, I wouldn't have any complaints. The wedding went smoothly, and it moved on to the reception. At the table were my father-in-law, Ethan, myself, and my parents. During the reception, Ethan muttered his complaints. What an awful tie. Ethan criticized the tie I picked, so I responded. What? I don't remember buying that. Doesn't your mistress usually pick your ties? Then, my father-in-law, who happened to overhear, glared at me. What did you say? What do you mean, Ethan? It's not like that. I always buy my ties, but Emma picks these tasteless ones. The color combinations, the patterns, they're all a mess. Ethan hastily made excuses and glared at me fiercely. Then my father-in-law spoke up. But Ethan, if you don't like it, you should bring your own. You can't always leave everything to your wife, then be unable to choose for yourself when it matters. That would undermine the dignity of the head of the family. I want my wife to be more assertive. That's why I make her study every day. Emma has no taste in ties, breakfast, or dinner. Emma has no taste. Ethan, since when did you have such taste? Initially, I decided on the ties and shirts because you were indecisive, but a year later, you said not to touch them. That's because you handle them badly. They get wrinkled when you touch them, so I don't want you to. Ethan, do they really get that wrinkled just by touching? Your mother was indeed good at ironing, but it never got wrinkled just by handling. Aren't you being too sensitive? Dad, no, you don't understand. First impressions are very important, right? That's why I'm overly sensitive to wrinkles and dirt. A suit is a man's pride. But Emma doesn't understand that. You say that, but those were gifts from your mistress. Ties, socks, and even dress shirts. I haven't used a detective agency, but I know. Because... Emma, what do you think? I do what I can, but indeed, as Ethan says, I don't subscribe to 4 newspapers, and my cooking is too bad to eat. Subscribe to 4 newspapers? Ethan, what's that about? Well, the newspapers, it's just that. Ethan says he wants this newspaper today, that one another day. Didn't you know that? And there was a time I ran a cooking class, you know my cooking skills, right? But it seems they weren't to Ethan's taste. I didn't say that. I'm just considering which newspaper to subscribe to long term. Please don't look so stern. And I want Emma to become a better cook, so I intentionally make harsh comments. Right, Emma? I was called out but turned away. As the ceremony proceeded, my father-in-law asked further. Harsh comments? Emma's cooking skills are professional level. And Ethan, aren't you the one nitpicking? It's not nitpicking. It's different. I just want to look cooler. Dad, from my point of view, you're a proper man. I want to be like that. So please don't look so stern. Ethan laughed it off, but during that, he intentionally kicked my leg. Then Ethan whispered to me. Don't say anything unnecessary. All right. I obeyed Ethan's words and said nothing more. Instead, during my sister-in-law's reception while a magician performed, I handed an envelope to my father-in-law. Emma? Please look at this. This is the real Ethan. I quietly handed an envelope to my father-in-law. Ethan, sitting on the opposite side, was engrossed in the magic show. With a puzzled look, my father-in-law took the envelope. After my sister-in-law's wedding and reception ended, Ethan, my parents, and I were called by my father-in-law into an empty room. Ethan, there's something I want to ask you. What is it, Dad? Ask me anything. Ethan, oblivious to what was coming. braced himself for the upcoming storm. Is it true that a year after getting married, you started coming home only in the mornings? And at home, you barely stay to eat or change clothes, just show your face. From a certain day on, you never let anyone touch your bag, is that true? That's not it. You're misunderstanding. As you know, I'm a sales director, so I'm busy with work. I don't want to worry my wife, so I only show my face in the morning. It might look like I'm coming home in the morning, but it's just because I'm considerate of my wife. I don't eat because I'm too busy, not even having time for eating. I survive on things like nutritional supplements. I don't let anyone touch my bag because I don't want the contents spilled out. Right? Would you like it if someone messed with your company documents or presentation materials? Well, indeed. My father was overwhelmed by Ethan's smooth talking and fell silent. What a well-prepared man to be able to say all this smoothly. I, infuriated, took over the conversation. And Ethan has a wide circle of female friends. It seems so. This envelope is filled with various information. Various information? Ethan, what's this about? Here are several photos of you entering hotels with different women, all of them different. What's all this about? My father-in-law showed one photo and then showed the rest to my parents. The photos had dates, and on closer inspection, they all showed Ethan holding hands with different women, entering what seemed to be hotel entrances. Some photos even showed him entering a hotel. Another piece of paper had a rough itinerary of Ethan's day, including days he didn't leave the hotel. The note records 3 women, presumed to be mistresses. And other notes suggest you've been flirting with various women. Emma told me those were your work days. Well, even Ethan was shocked by the several photos, and he couldn't stop sweating. As I wondered how he would respond, Ethan desperately pointed at me. It's all Emma's delusion. These few photos are trying to frame me. I've been working seriously, and I haven't touched any woman other than Emma. I swear to God, I haven't cheated or had an affair. Emma has recently developed a delusion problem. Yes, that's it. Really? So, is all of this just a made-up story? There's no turning back now. Of course. I would never betray my wife like that. Rather, it's my wife who's trying to betray me. I love her, yet Emma, marrying you was a mistake. This is outrageous. Stunned, I watched as Ethan blamed me. With all this evidence lined up, he still tried to escape. Even the greatest detectives would think he's terrible at giving up. Then I played my final card. A voice recorder. Please listen. Ethan says he loves me, but this is the real Ethan. The real Ethan? I pressed play on the voice recorder. Look at the families of my colleagues, they have 3 or 4 kids. And us? None. It's embarrassingly shameful. What a disaster of a wife I ended up with. We've been married for 5 years, and you're not infertile, are you? Don't start saying later that you want to try fertility treatments. That's just throwing money down the drain. It costs nothing to make kids naturally. I'm not paying extra, do it with your own savings if you want. Really, it's depressing from the morning, it's all your fault, you know? Well, a wife without a sense of responsibility wouldn't think about it, but you really are an awful woman. And what about this? Your husband is tying his tie, and you don't even help? Normally, a wife should be devoted to her husband. I'm sorry. I always tell you to have the newspapers ready for breakfast, but do you even care? You never bother to get them and always oversleep. Even though you go to bed before me at night, I give you the living expenses, and you can't even buy cigarettes, you're so bad at managing money. And don't you dare say that the living expenses aren't enough. I make enough money, it's your poor skills that are lacking. What about breakfast? Your cooking is so bad I can't eat it. I have to eat out. What kind of harassment is this? Your cooking is terrible. You should learn about my family taste. How about doing your bridal training at your mother's place? She's passed away, so it would be in the afterlife. Well, you can hardly be called a bride anymore. In the voice recorder, He's not expressing love but berating his wife. Ethan, what is this? No, it's... That's when the room freezes. Ethan! I've come to pick you up. As we were discussing in a room at the wedding venue, an unknown woman appeared. Everyone wondered, who is that, but Ethan alone looked pale. I confronted him. Ethan, what is this? Who is she? She's a colleague from work. We have plans for work after this. Ethan! What are you talking about? Oh, don't worry, I've booked a suite at the hotel so your wife won't find out. Olivia, what are you saying? While everyone was shocked, Ethan staggered to his feet. I reviewed the photos with my father-in-law. Is this her? The hairstyle is different. It seems so. It must be her. This woman here. Ethan, there are photos of you entering a hotel with this woman. I'm asking you again, who is she? Why don't you come clean? Well... Ethan, what's wrong? The unknown woman seemed clueless about the situation. She tried to join the conversation without realizing his wife was right there. Wait, you were cheating. No. She's just a colleague, not a lover. We will work together later. Ethan. Tell the truth. Who is she? You're supposed to work together later. She's in casual clothes, and you didn't bring a jacket. Oh, that. Sorry, I see you're busy. I'll come back later. I grabbed her by the neck to prevent her from escaping. Can you stay a little longer, Olivia? At that, Ethan let out a surprised yell. What? Emma! How do you know her name? Did you use a detective? I didn't use a detective. They are too expensive to hire. But I know, this woman, Olivia, is currently pregnant with your child. What? What a thing to say! Ethan, if this is true, it won't end just like that. Tell the truth. What do you mean you just show your face because you care for your wife? You need to explain properly to Emma and her parents. Ethan panicked. Then, realizing he was defeated, he finally said, I'm terribly sorry. I've been cheating, and she is carrying my child. I won't lie anymore. Just like in the photos, I have 3 mistresses, and yes, I've been with other women. I'm truly sorry. What a foolish son. Your mother in heaven is crying too. To touch other women while having a wife. Your patriarchal behavior isn't patriarchal at all, just spoiled brat behavior. Oh, what a day. If the public finds out about this, it will tarnish my daughter's name. In my heart, I applauded my father-in-law. I had Olivia sit down. If she's really pregnant, I can't let her stand for too long. Emma! Then Ethan begged to me. I'm truly sorry. Forgive me. I'll confess. Olivia and I, it wasn't just for fun, it wasn't serious, but I'll do anything. Just not a divorce. So? Whether it was for fun or serious, you admit you got her pregnant? You're a terrible person. Don't you all agree? I shouldn't have entrusted my daughter to you. What an awful thing you've done. How will you take responsibility now? Just getting a divorce isn't enough. I want you to suffer until death. You need to atone for this for the rest of your life. I understand how you feel. I feel the same way. Let's make this foolish son do whatever is necessary. I am so embarrassed by him. He was supposed to be the next president of the company, but it seems he is not up to the task. I was foolish to have chosen him. He can't handle the company. His trustworthiness has plummeted instantly. If this gets out in the company, I'd be too ashamed to even return to my office. He needs to leave the company. This is an order from me as the CEO. Dad, please wait. I will work for the company, so don't kick me out. I have to make amends to my wife, please. Is this the time to say such things? You foolish son. Do you know how much shame you have brought upon me here? Damn it, you are banished. Make amends with money you earn elsewhere. Never show your face to me, Emma's parents, or Emma again. Your sins are too severe. You've played with people's emotions. Emma, I am truly sorry. My father-in-law said this. I never thought my strict father-in-law would go this far. I don't mind if you divorce him. Please forgive me for having raised such a foolish son. You have done nothing wrong, I said calmly. It's my husband who is to blame, not you. No, it would be my fault too. I will ensure your future livelihood. Please. Then, I will claim everything from Ethan. We will also ensure Olivia's livelihood. After all, the child she is carrying is innocent, right? Let's explain the situation to the other women and apologize. That is enough for me, and yes, how about having his sister's husband take over the company? That might be a good idea. Emma, please don't say that. I will pay for using the detective agency. That's why I haven't used any detective agency or anything. You need to apologize to all the women you have been involved with. Well, considering everything up to now, it's not easy to forgive you. Please forgive me, I am sorry. There is no way I can forgive you. What about Olivia? She is having your child, isn't she? Are you just going to give her money and leave it at that? If left alone, she'll have to raise the child by herself. Do you know how hellish isolated parenting is? Even I, who have no experience in parenting, understand that. You have done something despicable as a person. If you want to make amends, do whatever it takes. I don't care anymore. Live your life however you want. I don't want to be involved with you anymore. Emma, what's wrong? Just then, my sister-in-law, who had changed back into her casual clothes from her wedding dress, peeked into the room. Hey! Everyone was looking for you, but Ethan, what's going on? Emma, why are you so angry? What happened? Actually. Emma, please forgive me. I will atone for my sins. Don't say it anymore. I kicked Ethan, who was clinging to my feet, and went to stand by my sister-in-law. Look. All of this is evidence of Ethan's affairs. That woman over there, Olivia, is the woman Ethan impregnated. What? Ethan, what have you done? Cheating. I never thought you were such a depraved person. Today was supposed to be the best day of my life, and because of you, it's the worst. What are you going to do about it? My sister-in-law said this and left the room crying. Thus, Ethan lost everything. Ethan, stunned, covered his face with his hands, turning pale. My father-in-law said to me, even though you didn't use a detective agency, it's a mystery how you gathered so much evidence. Emma, are you sure you didn't use a detective agency? Actually, a detective agency opened up nearby recently. But it was too expensive, so I asked the best detective I knew. Ethan provided only the minimum living expenses. Well, his other earnings probably went to those women, but even though we were struggling, he wouldn't let me work. So our savings are meager, but still he blames my management skills. Well, he's my ex-husband now. That's right, he's your ex-husband now. Please make my ex-husband sign an agreement here. I feel like if we send him home now, he might just disappear. Right, Ethan? Don't think you can just run away, okay? That's right, what Emma says is correct. After that, my father-in-law made Ethan write a pledge. I knew the names of all the women Ethan had been involved with, so I listed each one by name. Ethan was the sales director, but that was at his father's company. If he's kicked out of his father's company, how will he survive? I was curious but didn't ask in depth. Thus, I became a free woman. And soon after, I invited a woman who had helped me to a spa trip. From what I know through a detective, Ethan had been involved with multiple women even before we got married. The 3 women he chose as mistresses were like those from the nightlife industry, and one of them, Olivia, was pregnant by him. Later, I found out through Ethan's confession that he planned to frame me for something and replace me with Olivia. He was truly an unforgivable man, and at the same time, a pitiful one. Now that I am divorced from Ethan, he seems to have been kicked out of the company. Moreover, his father told him to move out of the house he was living in. Ethan packed his bags and left the house in tears. My arranged marriage, as the daughter of one of the company's business partners, thus came to an end. Considering it took 5 years, it was rather slow. Now, I am helping out at my father's company. Grace did the investigation on Ethan. My best friend Grace has an insatiable love for mystery novels and always wanted to play detective. When I saw the flyer for the detective agency, I almost gave up because of the prices. However, I thought Grace would happily take on the task, and we managed to cut the fee in half by consulting together. Grace eagerly conducted the investigation on Ethan, and her skills were nearly professional. I handed the detective agency flyer to Grace. "They're hiring here, you know." "Grace, why don't you work here?" "That sounds fun." "Emma, your request was really exciting. Carrying a camera, taking taxis, tailing the car in front, it really was something. I could have done more, but we ran out of time." "How was it?" "It's all thanks to you, Grace. I wonder what Ethan is doing now." "Not that it matters, but I'd like to have seen him fall from grace." "Well then, shall we go for a second round of investigation?" Grace's eyes sparkled. I gently declined. "That's okay, we don't need to go that far." "Well, he must be working somewhere? I guess he won't be returning to the sales department, though." I'm totally loving this room. Hey, can we rearrange the living room? Of course. This is your castle now, Michelle. The eldest son and his wife are quite giddy in their high-rise condo, overlooking lush green hills and a bustling city. It might seem like a delightful scene, but it's the exact opposite. That's because this is the house where I, the younger sister, live with my parents. Don't go rearranging things without asking. You still planning on living here, Meg? 40 years old and still a leech? Jobless loser, get out. I looked to my father for support, expecting him to scold my eldest brother and his wife. But instead, man, I'd love to live with a young wife too. In that moment, something snapped inside me. I was done. Done with my arrogant brother, his annoying wife, and even my dad who was head over heels for her. All right then, take good care of mom and dad. So you're finally moving out, huh? Don't want to see your depressing face anymore, leave today. My brother and his wife seem pleased, thinking they've succeeded in kicking out their loser older sister, while looking forward to their luxurious high-rise life. Little do they know what difficulties lie ahead. My name is Meg Roberts. I'm a 40-year-old single woman. I live with my aging parents, helping with household chores and taking care of my dad. I do mostly remote work, except for the occasional business trip. I've long been troubled by my difficult father and brother. My dad has always been a philanderer, spending most of the money on himself, so we've always struggled. And because of that stress, my brother, Alan, has been abusive towards me since childhood, always making me cry. My misfortunes continued into adulthood. I entered the workforce around the same time my dad got injured and couldn't work anymore. Bad things happen in threes, and just around then, Alan stole our savings and vanished. My already frail mom had to work multiple part-time jobs while taking care of dad, so I stepped up to help. Nights when I couldn't make it home from work, I'd stay overnight at the office, and then rush home to assist in caregiving. That's how my grueling 20s went by. I often thought about running away, but if I did, my kind-hearted, struggling mom would be left alone to deal with it all. As much as I hated my dad, I couldn't leave my mom all alone. In my mid-30s, my income finally started to stabilize, giving me some financial and emotional breathing room. About a year ago, during a business trip to Idaho, I stumbled upon a wonderful new high-rise. It was a modest 12-story building, but well located near the station and a supermarket, with a senior day care center and senior salon on the first floor. The building had excellent amenities like a gym and a spa. It was an ideal place to live for the long term. The view was also great, and for $500,000, you could get an apartment on one of the higher floors with a stunning view of the natural landscape. At the time, our old single-story house back in the New York metropolitan area was falling apart due to neglect over the years. I suggested moving to my mom, and she readily agreed. My dad was initially against it, but when he found out the high-rise was near a famous tourist attraction, he changed his mind. Probably just wanted to brag to his friends. We took the plunge and moved, and our new life started off well. We signed up for day services, became acquainted with the neighbors, and even participated in local festivals. The busy yet fulfilling year went by quickly. My dad goes to the senior day care center on the first floor 3 times a week. It's a facility that frequently organizes recreational activities, and the staff take him to hot springs and tourist spots. He keeps sending bragging postcards to relatives and acquaintances. It's a bit annoying that he's spreading the word as if he bought the high-rise condo with his own money, but since it doesn't cause any real harm, I let it be. My mom is making new friends at a senior salon and participating in community events and volunteering, which seems to be fun for her. It was also an ideal environment for me to work, and it seemed like I had finally achieved a calm and ideal life. However, the peace that had finally come to me was about to be shattered again. Alan suddenly appeared at the entrance of the high-rise condo. With Michelle, the woman he had an affair with and stole from her husband. That day, the ominous sound of the intercom echoed. When I saw the figure on the intercom camera, my heart froze. "Hey, I heard from a friend that you moved." "Dad, that's amazing. Where did you get the money to buy such an apartment?" It was Alan, my older brother, who had been out of touch no matter how many times I tried to contact him. Alan, with the top 2 buttons of his Aloha shirt undone, sunglasses on, and speaking in a thuggish tone. I asked him coldly what he wanted. "What do you want?" "Oh, it's you, Meg. I heard from a buddy that you quit your job years ago and hardly ever leave the house now, huh? Being an old unemployed loser, that's pathetic." I still couldn't forgive this brother of mine. Because of this man, my mother and I had a tough time. However, if Alan had shown any signs of remorse, I would have been able to let bygones be bygones and treat him kindly. Instead, Alan mocked me, whom he should have troubled. I became even more resolute. "If you have no business here, please leave." "What? I came all the way here to introduce you to my wife. Open up." Sure enough, there was a woman standing next to Alan. Honestly, I had a bad feeling about it, so I was reluctant. However, my mother said, "I don't know when we'll see him next, so I want to meet her," so I reluctantly unlocked the entrance. To my mother, he must still be her beloved son, no matter what. Alan, who barged into the room, sat down heavily on the sofa as if he had forgotten about the money he had embezzled when he was young. "When did you get married?" "Today." When Alan embraced his wife, Michelle, she boldly intertwined her arms. In front of her husband's family for the first time, doesn't she feel embarrassed or think she should be polite? But there was something more concerning. "Michelle, you've only been divorced for 6 months?" "Yeah." I took her away from her boring ex-husband, who only had being serious going for him. "Alan fought against the company to steal me away and escape. It was so cool." Michelle, who said she was 30 years old, had a face appropriate for her age, but her hairstyle and fashion were like a college student's. Moreover, she moved her body excessively and spoke in a high-pitched voice. I felt a strong aversion towards the two of them as they openly and glamorously talked about the fact that Alan lost his job due to the affair, without even trying to hide or downplay it. However, my father, who was there, was leering at Michelle with a lecherous gaze. "Michelle doesn't look 30 at all. She looks so youthful, almost like she's still in her teens, doesn't she?" "Ah, I'm so happy to hear that." Hearing Michelle's flirtatious voice, a cold wind blew through my heart. My mother was also stiffening her expression next to me. "This high-rise condo is very nice, but, Mr. Roberts, did you take on a loan at your age?" My father answered Michelle's intrusive question with pride. "I paid in full, so I only have to pay $100 for the management fee each month." "So financially stable." I couldn't take it anymore. I wanted them to leave as soon as possible, so I asked Alan, "When do you plan to go home?" "It's already evening, so we're staying here tonight." "What? It's a bit of a problem if you tell me suddenly. Didn't you book a hotel or something? I came back to my parents' house for a night. What's the problem? But we only have one spare bed. Then, Michelle blushed and wiggled as she said, I'm fine sharing a bed with Alan. Actually, I prefer that. Feeling nauseous, I took out my smartphone and immediately booked a nearby hotel. Please leave now. Alan was reluctant and grumbling, but my mother quickly handed him some cash. Stay at a hotel with this. Don't bother Meg. Then, Alan left satisfied, taking Michelle with him. Meg, I made you feel bad because I said I wanted to see Alan. I'm sorry. It's okay. It's not your fault, Mom. It's only natural for a parent to want to see their child after not hearing from them for years. When I remembered the faces of Alan and Michelle, who cleverly manipulated my mother's kind-heartedness to get money from her, I felt so frustrated that I couldn't help it. That day, I fell asleep at some point while working at the living room desk until late at night. Please stop, Alan. Leave. The next morning, I woke up with a start when I heard my mother's almost tearful shout from my room. I took off the blanket that my mother must have put on me and rushed to my room, only to be stunned by the scene before me. The room was ransacked, and things were scattered all over the floor. Alan and Michelle were throwing my clothes and daily necessities into a suitcase, one after the other. What are you doing? As I felt the blood drain from my face, Alan smirked and said, You don't have a room anymore. I see you have a lot of expensive clothes. I'll take some, okay? Stop it. Enough is enough. According to my mother, my father let Alan and Michelle into the room without asking them first thing in the morning. After Alan and Michelle closed their packed suitcases, they carried them to the living room and went out. I really like this living room. Can I redecorate it to Michelle's taste? I want to line up all volumes of That Love is the Wind of Early Spring here. It's a comic book that you love to read. Of course. This is your castle, after all. It would be a problem if you redecorated it without permission. Then Alan, trying not to burst into laughter, said, You still planning on living here? You're 40 and still want to leech off us? Unemployed losers should get out. He really intends to kick me out. I knew Alan was a terrible person, but I never imagined he could be this bad. It's embarrassing as a human being to act like your father-in-law's condo is yours. What are both of you talking about? Meg is. Alan brushed off my mother, who was trying to defend me. Can you be quiet, Mom? You're the one who raised a 40-year-old woman still living with her parent. It was bad enough that he was mocking me, but to hurl such abusive language at my mother was unacceptable. I was trembling with anger but swallowed it down. There would be no point in saying anything to such a couple. They had been looking down on me from the start. I looked at my father for help. His wife and daughter had been insulted to this extent. Surely he would scold Alan, wouldn't he? However, I kinda want to live with a young wife too. My father said such a carefree thing. At that moment, the tension in my heart snapped. I was fed up with my arrogant eldest son, his silly wife, and my father who was smitten with his daughter-in-law. Well, take care of yourselves then. Finally decided to leave, huh? I don't want to see your gloomy face, so leave today. This couple seemed to be basking in the joy of having driven out his parasite younger sister, who was leeching off their parents. They seemed to be looking forward to a glamorous life in a luxurious high-rise condo, without even dreaming of the hardships that awaited them. Having been kicked out with just one suitcase, I went to the nearest local city and rented a monthly apartment. I contacted my mother and had her send the rest of my belongings there. When I called to thank her for the delivery, my mother was crying, saying she felt pathetic. Meg, you're the most filial child. And yet, your father and Alan are too cruel. But the most pathetic one is me, who couldn't stop them. Currently, unemployed Alan and Michelle are leisurely job hunting while enjoying their dream life in the high-rise condo. Michelle even says things like, since the rent is covered, I can get by with less income, so it's okay for me to be a housewife, right? It's not your fault, Mom. Besides, they will be the ones to regret it in the end. Would you be willing to help me with what I'm going to do from now on? After listening carefully to the plan I laid out, my mother said this. If that happens, Alan and Michelle and your dad will be in a lot of trouble. But I think those three deserve it. I will cooperate. Thank you, Mom. I'll send some documents over. Make sure to get a signature from Alan at the right time and send it back. Understood. About a month later, Alan, who had been silent until then, suddenly contacted. Hey, a rent demand letter came. What does it mean to pay $1,000 in rent? When I questioned Dad, he said you bought the house. Were you deceiving me? Wasn't there no mortgage? I wasn't the one deceiving, it was Dad, right? As you already know, that room is in my name, and since I paid in full, I don't have a mortgage. Then why do I have to pay the rent? I sighed. Alan had accused me of leeching off our parents. But who was really trying to leech off someone else? There's no way he could live in the house of the sister he forcibly kicked out for free. It seemed like a massive boomerang. You're living there now, right? Since you're borrowing it from me, it's only natural to pay rent. You did agree to it, right? Huh? I don't remember agreeing to anything. Oh, that's strange. I have the original lease agreement here. It has your signature on it. There should be documents at your place that you can check too. Michelle and I turned the document holder upside down, and we could hear Alan freaking out over the phone. What is this? I really did sign it. When did I sign this? I don't know. Oh, I remember now, Mom gave it to me to sign. Huh? So you signed it without checking? Are you an idiot? Shut up, you were there too, right? It was when we were getting ready to go shopping. Why didn't you stop me? You're the worst. Are you trying to blame me? I listened to Alan and Michelle arguing over the phone with a sense of satisfaction. It wasn't a bad feeling. Where's Mom? Did she become Meg's minion? It's useless. She's with me now. She won't be back for a while. What? Hey, Meg, where are you now? Who knows? I don't have an obligation to tell you, do I? Speaking of obligations, you have an obligation to pay the rent, don't you? Alan stamped his feet in frustration. Damn it! I can't afford to pay $1,000 a month. I could hear the sound of Alan angrily smashing something like a bottle. If you break the floor or walls, I'll charge you for the repairs. You devil! Just then, Michelle, who had left earlier, came running back. I found Dad's passbook while rummaging through the drawers. We should be able to manage with this, huh? 23 cents? Not even $2,300? Is there a digit missing? The two of them were in such a panic that it seemed like a comedy, and I couldn't help but hold back my laughter. There's no way Dad has any savings. The moment Dad couldn't work anymore, you took everything and ran away, remember? Thanks to that, Mom and I had a really hard time. Michelle shouted at Alan, who was grumbling in frustration. What do you mean? Michelle, I haven't heard anything about this. Ah, shut up, bringing up the past. It's easy for the thief to forget, but the victim never forgets the pain. It's convenient, isn't it? Okay, then please take care of Dad's senior daycare payments too. At my words, Alan was silent for a few seconds, as if he didn't understand what I was saying. Wait, what did you just say? The daycare payment. It used to be automatically deducted from my account, but I stopped it. So from now on, you'll have to take care of it. Isn't the daycare fee included in the condominium maintenance fee? There's no way that's the case. How naive are you? You should face reality. Bye. I hung up the phone, exasperated. After that, Alan kept calling persistently, so I set my phone to reject his calls, and it finally became quiet. Later, Alan and Michelle, unable to afford the $1,000 monthly rent, had to leave the condominium. As soon as they found out he had no money, Dad was quickly abandoned and tried to rely on Mom, but he didn't know where she was, and her cell phone number had changed. He had no choice but to rely on me. Please apologize properly for everything you've done so far. And correct all the lies you've been bragging about to your relatives in postcards. Write that you can live a good life in the condo thanks to your daughter, me. Then, I'll let you stay in the condo again. My father seemed as if his pride had been shattered to pieces, and he became very quiet. However, at the end of the day, I think it was my father who underestimated me too much. This incident must have been a good lesson for him. When I returned to my condo and took a breather, the ominous chime rang again. When I checked through the video intercom, there stood Michelle, unbelievably. Such a jerk, that man. I couldn't believe my ears when she cursed, as if she couldn't have been openly flirting and calling him Alan just a while ago. That guy cheated on me right after leaving the condo. From what I gathered from Michelle's story, after leaving the condo, Alan and Michelle moved to the city, saying that condo was too rural. From now on, we will live a sophisticated city life. It was a classic case of sour grapes. But Alan, who was dismissed for misconduct, was unlikely to find a good job. Alan was apparently picky about his jobs and remained unemployed, eventually getting hooked on playing slots. They lived in a narrow, old apartment, and Michelle started supporting Alan by working full-time as a temporary staff. However, Michelle gradually became dissatisfied with Alan, who did not do household chores and was obsessed with slots, and they started having marital quarrels every night. So, he cheated. It's karma, isn't it? What's karma? I don't understand what you're saying. I started to feel a bit sorry for Michelle. You're pretty stupid and terrible too, but my brother is even worse. What a pity. But, I regretted sympathizing with her even for a moment after hearing her next words. So, you have money, right? Pay the alimony instead. After all, it's your fault for kicking us out. The conversation was so abrupt that I didn't understand what she was saying at first. As I gradually absorbed the situation, I was dumbfounded and firmly refused. There is no reason for me to take on the alimony, and if we go back to the root cause, you guys were the ones illegally occupying my house. When Michelle started yelling again, a serious-looking man in a suit and glasses appeared behind her and looked into the intercom camera. Excuse me, I came to pick up the latest manuscript of that win. Michelle was startled and glared at the man. Who are you? Oh, I'm sorry for not introducing myself. I am Jeff, the editor in charge of Mississippi Roberts. Today, I came to pick up the manuscript of the manga that Love is the Wind of Early Spring. After a brief pause, Michelle started screaming hysterically. What do you mean? Why is the editor of Michelle's Bible, That Wind, coming to this woman's house to pick up the manuscript? Huh? Don't tell me, huh? It is exactly what you are thinking. I revealed the truth while finding the situation amusing inside. The author of the shoujo manga That Love is the Wind of Early Spring, abbreviated as That Wind, which you have collected all volumes of, is me. It took a long time to gain recognition, but thanks to this work, which I started serializing about 5 years ago, becoming a big hit, I became known as a late-blooming manga artist. And finally, I was able to earn enough money to buy the condo. So, That Wind is a very important work for me. Michelle was speechless at first, then started to tremble gradually. So, some of the money I was happily spending to buy the latest volumes flowed to you as royalties. And all those heart-throbbing scenes were drawn by you, and I was being manipulated. It was understandable that Michelle was confused, as the author of the comic book she revered as a Bible was the sister of the man she was currently hating. Michelle seemed to be filled with anger and shame, screamed "Gah!" and ran outside. And she never came back again. Later, I heard that Michelle and Alan got divorced. It seems that the person Alan had an affair with dumped him as soon as she found out he was an unemployed gambling addict. Now, I heard through the grapevine that Alan is making ends meet by working a live-in job. It seems to be a manual labor job that he used to be picky about and avoid. Since Alan has not contacted me, I do not intend to contact him either. If he contacts me, it must be for some ulterior motive, so I hope things stay this way for the time being. My parents and I returned to our former lives. The only slight difference might be that my father doesn't complain as much as he used to. He used to grumble about trivial things, but now it seems he feels inferior to me. By the way, the other day, my editor, Jeff, brought me the results of a reader survey for That Wind. It seems that it won the first place in popularity among the serialized comic books in the magazine. I decided to continue drawing the comic book for my readers and for myself. In this beautiful nature visible from the condo. We're all gonna stay over, isn't that nice? I was dumbfounded by my mother-in-law's words right in front of me. My mother-in-law had come to my house without any notice. Behind her, there were 5 other women of her age, her friends. I had no idea she was coming today, and it was the first I'd heard of such a large group staying over. Seeing my stunned expression, my mother-in-law grinned and looked over at her friends behind her. Sorry about my slow daughter-in-law. Well, how long are you planning to make us stand in the doorway? Pressured to let them in by my mother-in-law, all I could do was frown in distress. Seemingly impatient, she forcibly stepped inside, at which point I pointed to something. Excuse me, mother-in-law, but about this. My name is Catherine, and I am currently a full-time housewife, 6 months pregnant. I had severe morning sickness, so I took maternity leave early and left the restaurant where I had worked for over 10 years. I had good relationships with my coworkers, so work was very enjoyable. I really wanted to work until the last minute, but my husband and colleagues advised against it. But I was filled with happiness. That's because, after 5 years of marriage, I was finally pregnant with our long-awaited child. When my husband and I met, we were both already 28 years old. We both liked children, but given our age, we tried not to get our hopes up too much. We worked hard, saved money, and looked forward to our annual trips as one of our greatest joys. Whether or not we had a child, we agreed to cherish these moments. And then, finally, we were blessed with a baby. However, almost as soon as I found out I was pregnant, my husband's long-term business trip was confirmed. He negotiated with his company, but due to business needs, he was deemed the most suitable candidate, and it was decided that he would stay out of town for about a year. So, I needed to get through daily life, prenatal checkups, and possibly even childbirth on my own. My husband was very worried, but in the end, he held my hand tightly and said, "I'll work hard and earn money for you and the baby." Since he was sending me living expenses during my leave, I could focus on housework. When I was feeling well, I did some part-time work to add to our savings. Some people might choose to go back to their parents' house to rest. However, my parents died in a car accident when I was young. All that was left were my sister, who is 3 years older than me, and myself. Because we were estranged from our relatives and there was no one to take us in, we both went to a foster house. Since then, we consulted each other about even the smallest things, never fought, and supported each other throughout our lives. My sister was always reliable, but after losing our parents, she became even more dependable. Even though she must have been incredibly anxious, she never shed a tear in front of me. My sister is already married and has children. She has her own happy life, so I didn't want to impose. On the other hand, my husband's father passed away a few years ago. He was the president of a food company and worked tirelessly until just before his death. My mother-in-law took over the company, and my husband became the vice president and executive director. Because my husband took over the visits to branch offices and partner companies for my elderly mother-in-law, I knew he traveled frequently even before we were married. Although we didn't have much time to spend together, I couldn't complain since we relied on my husband's income, especially since I got pregnant. However, I couldn't help but wonder if this long-term business trip was deliberate. Considering the company's personnel and the nature of the work, it was understandable that my husband was the most suitable candidate. But considering the timing and my mother-in-law's personality, I couldn't help but feel uneasy. This wasn't just because I was battling my ever-growing belly and changing physical condition daily. Unfortunately, I was aware that my mother-in-law disliked me. She had always been somewhat cold to me, but her harassment became even worse after my father-in-law's death, causing me stress. Being ignored was the norm, and whenever I visited her house, my shoes would be hidden, and cash would be taken from my wallet when I wasn't looking. Although it could only have been my mother-in-law, she never admitted to it as there was no proof. What? You're saying I'm a thief? Where is the evidence for that? Is my name written on the money? Or did you take a picture of me stealing it? Ha, you're really just a money-grubbing woman after my son's income. A terrible woman who seduced my adorable only son, used pregnancy as a shield to avoid working, and extorted money from my son. You said you don't have parents? Did you get disowned because of your bad behavior? It doesn't matter why, but do you think a woman raised in a foster house without parents is qualified to be my son's wife? Ah, so that's why you're accusing someone of stealing money. She spat out every possible aggressive word and tormented me. Furthermore, I was strictly forbidden to tell anyone about this. Try snitching to Tommy. I'm sorry to interrupt his hard work, but I'll get him fired and kick you out. How will you two survive without jobs, I wonder? Tommy is my husband. If I told my husband about the harassment from my mother-in-law, he would be fired, taken back to his parents' house, and I would be left penniless. My mother-in-law has an extreme personality, and it's not impossible that she would actually do it. I loved my husband, and I couldn't bear to take away the father of my child in my womb just because I offended my mother-in-law, so I endured it alone. Fortunately, our house and my in-laws' house are more than an hour's drive away, so we don't see each other very often. When I reached the second trimester of my pregnancy, the so-called stable period, my sister invited me on a short trip. Both my sister and her husband had the day off during the holiday, and they could leave their child with her husband. One of the main purposes of the trip was to report my pregnancy to our parents on their death anniversary. My sister considered my physical condition a top priority, arranged for plenty of rest time, and found a hotel that was comfortable even for pregnant women. When I called my husband to tell him about the trip, he told me to spread my wings and enjoy myself. I managed to cover the travel expenses with my own money without touching the living expenses. Because my physical condition changed drastically, I packed little by little for the trip, and I was ready by the day of departure. On that day, my sister was supposed to pick me up by car in the morning, and then we would head to the train station. As I was doing the final check of my luggage and anxiously waiting for my sister, the doorbell rang. Unable to suppress my excitement and joy, I opened the door, but it was not my sister, it was my mother-in-law. And behind her were 5 unfamiliar middle-aged women. What's with that dumbfounded face? We're staying here from today, so let us in. Excuse me? Everyone came from far away. Don't leave them standing outside, let them in quickly. Still unable to understand what my mother-in-law was saying, I stood there dumbfounded. Catherine, what are you doing standing there? Hurry up and make coffee for my friends. I thought you would be loafing around at home during the holidays, so I brought everyone to hang out with you. You should be grateful. When my mother-in-law said that, one of the women said, "It's a stable period, right? I was working until just before giving birth, but it's nice to be able to relax when your husband earns well. I'm so jealous." I was internally furious, but I couldn't deny it because I was indeed living on my husband's income. Nevertheless, it was strange for her to suddenly appear and bring her friends without notice. It was extremely inconsiderate, especially since it wasn't even her house. The women were friends from a class my mother-in-law attended, and they often interacted privately. This time, to deepen their friendship, they coordinated their holidays and planned a 6-day, 5-night girls' trip a week in advance. Apparently, my mother-in-law volunteered to host. Jess told us a lot about you. Even though you're pregnant, you're a perfect and capable wife. When we heard about the sleepover, you voluntarily offered to let us stay here, right? And with 3 meals a day. My mother-in-law made up the story, and to prevent me from escaping, she kept it a secret until the day of. I was quite bewildered by the harassment, which was on a different scale from before, and couldn't stand it anymore, so I appealed to my mother-in-law. "Please look at this." What I pointed to was a travel bag placed at the entrance. It was not the amount of a day trip, and my mother-in-law twitched her cheeks. Before my mother-in-law could say anything, I said, "I'm very sorry, but I wasn't aware of any such arrangement. Actually, I am planning to go back to my hometown with my sister. We will be away from home for a while, so could you please take your things with you?" My mother-in-law was a little flustered, perhaps because she didn't expect me to argue. "Oh, I've been saying that for a month now, haven't I? It's your fault, Catherine, if you don't remember? You can go back to your hometown anytime because you're unemployed, so why don't you do it next time?" Perhaps because her friends were watching, she didn't get angry as usual. Sweat appeared on my forehead, and I forced a smile. I saw her friends whispering in the background and thought this was my chance, so I said more. "It was decided a week ago that you would stay over, right? That means I wouldn't have known a month ago that I needed to make my house available, right? Could it be a misunderstanding on your part?" I thought I might have said too much, but it was too late. My mother-in-law glared at me with a demonic expression, her temples throbbing. However, because there were people around, she didn't raise her hand. No matter what happens later, if I let her into the house now, it would be playing into her hands. So I kept arguing with her at the entrance. Let me in, make coffee, walk to the supermarket and buy a lot of alcohol. I was terrified of my mother-in-law and her friends, who were coming at me with an attitude that was unthinkable for guests visiting someone's home. They might force their way in from the entrance. Just as I was afraid of that, my sister arrived in perfect timing and looked surprised when she saw my mother-in-law and her friends. Maybe I looked terrible because she immediately joined the circle. "Oh, are you Catherine's sister? What a coincidence! We are having a girls' party at Catherine's invitation today. Did you come to help by any chance? Wow, you're so considerate." "No, I just came to pick up my sister. We are going out now, so I don't have time to entertain my sister's mother-in-law and friends. Could you please move out of the way because you are in the way?" My mother-in-law was momentarily silent at my sister's clear words. However, she immediately started to speak to her friends in a mocking tone. "Oh my, she says we're in the way. Even though she knows I'm Catherine's mother-in-law, she says we're in the way. I can't believe it. Her parents must have raised her poorly, huh? I think that's unbelievable even for me. You know you shouldn't say in the way to someone you're meeting for the first time, right? With all due respect, from my point of view, you're suspicious people who, despite my sister's repeated refusals, are forcing your way into her house, demanding coffee, and being unreasonable. Please go home. If you don't leave, I will report you to the police for trespassing." My sister did not flinch at all at the high-pitched laughter of my mother-in-law and her friends. When my sister clearly mentioned reporting to the police, my mother-in-law and her friends, their faces red with anger, came closer and started shouting. "What do you mean by that tone? If you invite someone, it's natural to entertain them, right? You're such an infuriating woman, I can't believe it. Who do you think you are, threatening to report to the police? That's unbelievable, especially coming from someone who's a stranger." Even when confronted like that, my sister only glared at my mother-in-law and her friends with cold eyes. And then, the words of my mother-in-law and her friends began to imply insults and threats to harm me. "Oh, I can't take it anymore. I'm scared to take care of my son's child with such a stupid woman. I wonder if I could avoid seeing my grandchild's face by giving a strong shock to this fat woman's belly right now?" As vulgar laughter echoed, my sister, who had been expressionless until then, slowly narrowed her eyes. By the way, the biggest problem in such disputes is the he said she said argument. So, I have been recording everything since I came here. My sister showed her smartphone with a very refreshing smile. The screen displayed that it was recording, and the time was ticking in real time, clearly showing that it was recording. As I've been saying, please go home. It's a crime to not only not agree to this request from someone who is not even the homeowner, but also to target my sister's belly, who is the homeowner. Ignoring the stunned mother-in-law, my friends quickly made their excuses, saying, I didn't say anything. Yeah, I was just invited too. I had no idea Catherine was planning to go out. And scattered like the wind. By the time my mother-in-law came to her senses, her friends were quickly moving away from the house. Despite calling out for them to wait, my mother-in-law didn't even glance at me and instead ran off in their direction. My sister let out a deep sigh and carried my travel bag, which was left at the entrance, to the car. Why did you open the door? Even if you knew I was coming, you should have confirmed who the visitors were. What would have happened if those people were more impatient and careless? You have no idea. She scolded in an exasperated tone. I repeatedly apologized to her. Then, as we both fastened our seatbelts and started the car, my sister glanced at me. Were you being treated well by that lady? She doesn't seem like a kind mother-in-law at all. You're not alone anymore, you know? It's not good to be stressed during this time. Does Tommy know about this? I hope you haven't kept it from him. Ugh, you should explain everything over the phone now. She advised, fully aware of my tendency to not properly consult my husband. I clenched my smartphone and called my husband. But unfortunately, the call didn't go through. While waiting for a callback, I gradually began to tell my sister about the mother-in-law's behavior. How she didn't like me and treated me as an enemy, how she threatened to fire my husband, who is the president of the company, if I dared to consult him, and how she threatened to force a divorce and abandon me if I told my sister, who has her own family, thereby causing her trouble. Just recalling my mother-in-law's past actions made it impossible for me to hold back tears. My sister drove as smoothly as possible to minimize the bumps. However, perhaps due to the hormonal changes of pregnancy, I couldn't stop crying no matter how much I tried. Although I wanted to switch my mood to enjoy the overnight stay with my sister, my heavy heart showed no signs of lifting. Moreover, crying didn't provide any relief. Nevertheless, I had pretty much made up my mind. After this, even if I have to do it over the phone, I will inform my husband about everything to protect our unborn child. Given the stress caused by my mother-in-law's harassment, the one most affected is the baby. Yet, because of my weakness, I haven't been able to speak up, and as a result, I continue to expose myself to stress. Can I really become a mother? If I tell my husband, will my mother-in-law actually fire him, and if so, what will happen to our lives? The more I think about these worrisome thoughts, the deeper I sink into despair. Feeling a sense of relief from finally seeing my sister after so long, I let my emotions flow freely and started to cry, only to suddenly find it hard to breathe. I hurriedly tried to calm myself down, but contrary to my efforts, I felt increasingly nauseous and struggled to breathe. My throat and chest tightened, and by the time I realized I couldn't breathe, I started to panic. Then, a sharp pain shot through my abdomen, causing me to let out a raspy groan. Catherine, are you okay? Hang on, I'm going to pull over. My sister shouted from the driver's seat as my vision began to blur. Feeling disappointed with myself for causing trouble again, Suddenly, everything before my eyes became bright and clear. I found myself staring up at a white ceiling, realizing from its height and color that it wasn't the interior of my sister's car. My gaze darted around, and I deduced that I was in a hospital, lying on a clean bed, apparently having been asleep. An N4 was hooked up to my arm, and a belt-like device was wrapped around my abdomen. Since no one was around, I pressed the nurse call button, and a nurse promptly came to my aid. From her, I learned that I had passed out due to hyperventilation. I was brought to the hospital by an ambulance my sister had called and was immediately admitted due to the risk of preterm labor. A device to monitor the baby's heartbeat was attached to my belly because I was diagnosed with a high risk of preterm labor. The risk of premature birth seems to increase with stress and intense exercise, and when I heard that, I could relate a lot. The household chores dumped on me by my mother-in-law, the barrage of verbal abuse, all of it seemed to be putting the baby in danger. I was told to be on absolute bed rest for a while, so as I was lying in bed, my sister and husband came to visit. While I was sleeping, my sister explained everything she knew to my husband. As soon as my husband saw my face, he collapsed on his knees, repeating how glad he was that I was safe. When he found out that the baby's heartbeat was confirmed to be fine, he shed tears and apologized to me. "I'm really sorry that this happened because I wasn't around. I bear some responsibility for not noticing sooner. I will take appropriate measures, so please wait a little longer." My husband then left the hospital room temporarily, leaving my sister and me alone. My sister took care of everything for me and even went home to bring me extra clothes and toiletries that weren't in my travel bag. "I've been your sister for many years, so I can guess where you keep your stuff and what you need." Just kidding, Tommy actually told me where everything was in a text. My heart was warmed by my sister's smile, and I apologized again for not being able to go on the trip. While we were talking, my husband came back. His face was red with anger, but he gradually calmed down and explained the situation. "I told my mother over the phone that she needs to step down as CEO. She's been using her position to harass you, and even got her friends involved. Someone who does that doesn't deserve to be at the top of a company." Of course, she opposed it, but since she became CEO, the company's performance has been declining, and she lacks the qualities of a manager. She doesn't have the ambition to study and improve the company, and whenever she opens her mouth, she brings up the fact that she's the CEO, and if anyone opposes her, she immediately brings up my father's name and accuses them of being ungrateful. I've already discussed it with the other executives, and they agree. No matter how much she resists, I won't back down. I'll make sure everyone understands and hold a board meeting. "Oh, I'm sorry, please don't worry, dear sister-in-law. I will protect Catherine and the baby. I apologize for the trouble." Seeing my husband apologize repeatedly to my sister, I was able to feel that everything would be all right if I left it in his hands. After that, my husband visited every day. During that time, his smartphone was constantly ringing, and he turned off the notifications, saying, "It's probably my mother." I was hospitalized for about a week, and I was able to rest my body thoroughly in an environment where I was protected from my mother-in-law. My health improved rapidly, and it was decided that I would be discharged, but since there was a chance of encountering my mother-in-law if I went home, I decided to stay at my sister's house for the time being. Around the time I was discharged, my husband returned from a business trip, and to be prepared in case my mother-in-law came, he decided to wait at home. Sure enough, my mother-in-law came to our house, but my husband tried to send her away. However, just as he was about to close the front door, she shouted, "My affair with Mr. Young from a client company has been exposed. Help me." Curious, my husband listened to her story, and it turned out that my mother-in-law was having an affair with the president of a client company. She was about to be forced to resign as CEO, and in her desperation, she went to her lover for help. But for some reason, she went to his house at a time when his wife was there, and she was caught red-handed. Because of who was involved, the news inevitably reached the ears of people within the company. As a result, the affair with the president of the client company pushed my mother-in-law's dismissal. The executives, who had been hesitant to act because of the respect they had for my late father-in-law, were able to unanimously agree to remove my mother-in-law from her position as CEO, thanks to the discovery of her misconduct. In the end, my mother-in-law had to resign as CEO. I seemed to be out of her mind, as I hadn't received any calls on my smartphone recently. Thinking it might be safe to go home, I decided to return to my own house. Of course, I locked the doors and monitored the visitors, and to be safe, my sister came over during the daytime when my husband wasn't home. With the approval of my sister and husband, we made sure that I was never alone. One evening, I received a text from my husband saying he was about to head home, so my sister started preparing to leave. Just then, there was a loud banging noise from the direction of the balcony. Shocked and frightened, my sister and I cautiously pulled back the curtain, and to our surprise, my mother-in-law was there. She must have seen the lights on and thought I was home. Seeing my mother-in-law banging on the glass with bloodshot eyes, I felt my knees buckle. It's one thing for her to be at the front door, but to get onto the balcony, she would have had to climb over the fence. Where on earth did she climb up from? She was yelling something, but the windows of the balcony were made of thick glass for security purposes, so I couldn't understand what she was saying. I was stunned and could only stare at my mother-in-law as she continued to pound on the glass with a demonic expression. The glass wouldn't even crack from a woman hitting it with her bare hands. However, if she found the gardening shovel on the balcony, it would be dangerous. As I panicked, wondering what to do, my sister seemed to calm down. She took out the video camera she had brought just in case and started recording my mother-in-law's actions. While she was doing that, I called the police and, realizing the gravity of the situation, I shakily contacted my husband. He had already left work and told me to hang in there for just a few more minutes. My sister continued to explain the situation to the police while holding me with one arm. The police arrived before my husband did, so my sister guided them from the front door to the balcony. When my mother-in-law saw the police officer through the window, she surprisingly climbed over the balcony railing and disappeared. Just as I thought she had escaped, the police quickly split up and ran in two directions. One went towards the balcony, and the other exited through the front door and circled around to the back. I was worried she might have gotten away, but that concern was quickly alleviated. It seemed that my mother-in-law had misstepped while climbing over the railing and was caught writhing in pain by the officer who circled around. She was taken into custody, and my sister handled all the questioning for me. I felt pathetic for relying on my sister so much, but I knew I couldn't just wallow in self-pity. I gathered my courage and explained everything to my husband when he got home. It turned out to be the right decision not to be alone, even for just a few hours. I get goosebumps just thinking about what might have happened if my sister wasn't there. In the end, my mother-in-law was arrested for breaking and entering. The recording my sister took of her threatening to hit my stomach helped our case, but since she didn't actually cause any harm, she couldn't be charged with assault. Instead, it seemed that they were going to charge her for trespassing on other residents' balconies to get to our room. My husband's company faced difficulties as the president was arrested, which negatively affected its performance and put them in a tough spot. However, my husband and the executives continued to respond sincerely, and thanks to the trust built by my father-in-law, they managed to keep the business running. My husband decided to become the president and make the company even better than it was during my father-in-law's era. On the other hand, I was relieved that my mother-in-law was no longer in my life, and I was able to safely give birth. Despite being told I was at risk for premature birth, the delivery went smoothly, and I gave birth to a healthy baby boy. During my hospital stay, not only my husband but also my sister and her family visited me almost every day. After I was discharged, they even came to my house to help with the housework. My sister's child, who just started middle school and wants to be a child care worker in the future, said, "Cute," many times while looking at the baby, so I let her hold him until she was satisfied. Seeing our children interact fulfilled a dream I had since I was a child, and I felt incredibly happy. I'm sure my sister felt the same way. Watching our children together, her eyes seemed kinder than ever before. After my maternity leave ended, I was able to return to work, which I love. However, I couldn't work all day like before, and until my child grows up a bit, working about 3 hours a day was the limit. The stress after childbirth was nothing compared to the harassment I received from my mother-in-law during pregnancy. I didn't feel much irritation towards my long-awaited child and was able to interact with him in a relaxed manner. About 2 years later, we found out that a second child was growing in my belly. While we eagerly awaited the pregnancy with our son, it was not the same this time. Of course, we wanted to have another child, but we were able to take our time with family planning while discussing it as a couple, so perhaps that's why the stork brought a baby to us. Our son, although still small, was delighted at the prospect of having a younger brother or sister and would stroke my belly every day. As a family, we are all looking forward to meeting our new family member and spending each day happily in anticipation.